Fine, let's get a divorce. I don't care. My lover will cover the alimony.
These words, spoken with a twisted expression, came from Julie, my son Kevin's wife. Julie had always viewed me as an enemy. She had secretly hurled cruel insults at me and thrown away the food I'd brought as a gesture of kindness. But honestly, I could overlook those things. It's not uncommon for a mother-in-law to be disliked by her daughter-in-law. However, she went beyond that. She tried to hurt my beloved family. When confronted, she lashed out, turned defiant, and declared she didn't mind getting a divorce. I let out a quiet sigh. Her son, and my grandson, Chris, has grown into a kind and honest boy. It's hard to believe he's the child of a woman like Julie, who now stands before us with a twisted face, making a spectacle of herself. I wanted Chris to grow up happy in a normal, loving family. If possible, I had hoped Julie could remain his mother, but it's far too late for that now. Slowly, I opened my eyes and glared directly at the woman who had dared to harm my family. My name is Betty, and I'm a 59-year-old part-time homemaker. I live with my husband, David, and while managing the household, I also work full-time. We have a son named Kevin, and he's an amazing son. He's smart, just like David, and on top of that, he's incredibly kind. I can't help but think we did a great job raising him. Kevin takes after David, not me, not my absent-minded self.
What are you talking about? His kindness comes from you.
Even at our age, we find ourselves complimenting each other like this, and Kevin always looks exasperated.
All right, you two are way too lovey-dovey.
As a close-knit family, we've lived a peaceful life together. Of course, we've had our share of ups and downs, but we've always overcome challenges as a family. 15 years ago, Kevin got married. His wife, Julie, was a college classmate who apparently pursued him quite passionately.
Well, Kevin is such a wonderful guy. All my peers admired him, and I thought if I didn't act fast, someone else would snatch him up. So I hurried to confess my feelings.
Julie shared this with a cheerful smile. She always speaks so highly of Kevin, but Julie herself is quite stunning. At one point, Kevin told me that every guy at their college had their eyes on her. To me, they make such a perfect couple, and I always thought Kevin was lucky to marry someone like Julie. But lately, Julie has been acting cold toward me. Ever since our grandson, Chris, was born, I've gradually felt a sense of distance, and recently, she doesn't even smile when I talk to her. Did I unknowingly do something to upset her? I tend to be a bit absent-minded, so maybe I did something unnecessary without realizing it. But since we're family now, I really want to get along. However, as time went by, the distance between Julie and me only grew, and I felt powerless to change it. These days, whenever Julie sees me, I feel like her expression turns slightly unpleasant. What should I do? Maybe I'll bring her some fresh vegetables as a gift. I have a hobby of growing vegetables in my backyard, and with the recent rise in prices, this hobby has been pretty useful. I figured Julie must be struggling with the price increases too, and it might help a little. Back when Julie and I got along well, shortly after their wedding, she was delighted when I brought her some vegetables I'd grown.
Betty, your vegetables are absolutely delicious.
Remembering her kind words, I decided to bring her some vegetables again. I quickly harvested some veggies and brought them to the apartment where Kevin and Julie live.
Oh, thanks.
But Julie accepted the vegetables with a blank expression, and before I could say anything else, she shut the door in my face. Well, I guess it can't be helped, I thought to myself as I headed back home. A few days later, I texted Kevin to ask how they liked the vegetables.
Your veggies? We haven't eaten them yet.
Has she not cooked them yet? Puzzled, I decided to bring more vegetables on another day and visited Julie again. That time too, Julie took the vegetables with the same blank expression. Oh no, I forgot my umbrella. Since the sun was strong today, I had brought a parasol, but I left it leaning against the wall by their front door and walked away without it. As I've gotten older, I've become more forgetful, and it's frustrating. Just as I was about to hurry back to their apartment, a shocking scene caught my eye. Oh, Julie, wait, is that the vegetables I brought? Julie was at the apartment's trash area, throwing away the vegetables I had brought her. Stunned, I turned around and walked away. I tried to convince myself that she threw them out because they didn't taste good. Just to be sure, I served the homegrown vegetables for dinner and asked David how they tasted.
What? They're as good as always.
But that was the response I got from him. Ever since the incident where Julie threw away my vegetables, I stopped bringing her any. I kept wondering if I had done something wrong, but nothing came to mind. Should I just ask Julie directly? I was so troubled by it that I started considering such an outrageous idea. While I was preoccupied with these thoughts, Chris graduated from elementary school. Congratulations, Chris.
Thanks, Grandma. Are you sure it's okay for me to have such an expensive bike?
After Chris graduated, I gave him an electric bike as a graduation gift. The private school Chris attends is quite far from home and involves some steep hills along the way. The school is quite far from their home, and it seems Chris had been saving up his allowance to buy an electric bike. When David and I heard about it, we decided to gift him an electric bike as a graduation present. Don't hold back. You worked really hard with your studies, but make sure you take care of the maintenance, all right?
Got it.
Chris looked so happy riding his new electric bike and fiddling with it. Kevin also seemed delighted watching Chris enjoy himself.
Betty, can I have a word with you?
Sure, what's the matter? Julie called me aside, away from everyone else. Once we were alone, she let out a dramatic sigh and said,
Betty, you might not know this, but for occasions like this, it's customary to give cash as a gift.
What?
Honestly, something like that is just a hassle.
Julie's beautiful face twisted into a scowl. Her eyes, directed at me, were filled with disgust. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I apologized hastily, but she ignored me.
Seriously, such a clueless old woman.
On top of that, she muttered an insult about me just loud enough for me to hear. It was the first time anyone had ever said something so harsh to me, and I was so shocked I couldn't move. Leaving me there, Julie went back to the others.
Chris, it's time to put the bike away. Don't forget you still have homework to do.
All right.
I heard Chris reply, sounding disappointed. David, perhaps concerned that I hadn't come back, came over to check on me.
Betty, what's wrong?
"Oh, nothing. I'm fine," I said quickly, though I debated whether to tell him what had just happened. Was that even real? Julie had always been distant toward me, but she had never used such vulgar language or spoken in a harsh tone, even in front of others. I couldn't believe that Julie had insulted me, and in the end, I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone about it. I had no choice but to keep this incident buried deep in my heart. I really don't feel like going there anymore. Since then, I've avoided visiting Kevin and Julie's house. However, last night, Kevin visited our house and accidentally left something behind, asking me to drop it off at their place. With no choice, I made my way to their apartment. As I arrived, I noticed Julie standing in front of the building with a group of women, chatting. Quickly, I ducked behind a corner to avoid being seen. Carried by the wind, I could hear Julie and the others talking. It seemed to be a gathering of moms who lived in the same apartment complex.
So, my clueless old hag of a mother-in-law brought over some vegetables the other day. They were filthy, covered in dirt. It wasn't just unhelpful, it was a total nuisance. I didn't even want them in the house, so I threw them out right away.
When Julie said this, the other moms burst into laughter.
Julie, your mother-in-law sounds like the absolute worst.
Yeah, from the stories, she sounds like she's totally clueless, but an old lady acting clueless is just so cringe.
Exactly.
Laughter filled the air again. The old lady and mother-in-law they were mocking were undoubtedly me. I was so shocked that I returned home, tears welling in my eyes. I didn't explain anything to Kevin and just messaged him, saying I was too busy to stop by. A few days later.
Mom, you seem down lately. Dad mentioned it too. You don't look like yourself.
That's not true. When Kevin called me on a video chat and said that, I stammered, trying to deny it.
Really?
Kevin, always perceptive, must have known I wasn't telling the truth. But he didn't press me for details. I almost started crying at his kindness, but I held back.
Betty, is everything all right? Are you feeling unwell or something?
Julie joined the video call, looking concerned. The moment I saw her face, my heart sank. To say such cruel things behind my back and then act so caring. It was almost impressive how convincing her performance was. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking me," I replied, pretending not to know anything, and continued the conversation. Should I just come clean about everything right now? But even if I told them what happened, would David or Kevin believe me? If they didn't, I'd end up being seen in a strange light by everyone. They could even think I'm just a spiteful mother-in-law trying to pick on her. The fear of that kept me from saying anything.
What's up, Chris? Mom, Chris says he wants to talk to you. Is that okay?
Of course. Suddenly, Chris's face filled the screen.
Grandma, are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you for asking me. Hearing my response, Chris smiled and, with an innocent expression, said,
Grandma, let's play the staring game.
"Oh, sure. That brings back memories." When Chris was younger, we often played the staring game together. He's in middle school now, but he's still just a little kid at heart. Smiling, I played the staring game with Chris over the phone. Oh. But instead of making a funny face like usual, Chris started moving his mouth silently. For a moment, I tilted my head in confusion, but then I quickly understood what he meant. Wait, could it be? I stopped mid-sentence and quickly covered my mouth. Then, smiling warmly, I said to Chris, "Oh my, I lost. Chris, you're as good at the staring game as ever." As I said this, I nodded slightly toward Chris. He nodded back subtly and then casually handed the phone back to Kevin, acting as if nothing had happened. "Oh, it's almost dinner time."
Already? Mom, you should come over again sometime. You're always welcome.
"Thank you. I feel much better after laughing with Chris, so I'll visit soon." Kevin looked pleased as I said this. Once I ended the call and put down the phone, my smile vanished, and I turned to David with a serious expression. "David, listen." What followed took an unexpected turn. On a Saturday afternoon after a hectic week, David and I went to visit Kevin's family at their apartment. "Thanks for having us." Kevin and Chris greeted us warmly, but as usual, Julie's face remained expressionless.
Betty, can you help me with the drinks?
Of course. When Julie called me to the kitchen, she turned to me with a face twisted in annoyance.
Betty, don't you and David have anything better to do? Unlike you two, I'm busy. Can you just leave after having your drinks?
She pushed a tray of drinks toward me roughly as she said this. But instead of taking it, I gave Julie a sharp look.
What?
Julie's voice wavered slightly, clearly taken aback. I had never responded to Julie like this before. I had always maintained a certain distance, treating her as the wife who married my son and the mother of my adorable grandson. But today, that ends. Instead of accepting the tray, I pushed it back toward her. I turned to Julie, who looked shocked, and spoke loudly. "You're having an affair, aren't you?"
What are you suddenly talking about?
Chris told me. At my words, Julie's eyes widened more than ever before. The other day during the video call when I played the staring game with Chris, he mouthed something to me.
Mom is having an affair. She's trying to steal Dad's money. Help.
I understood what Chris was saying from his lips and immediately consulted with David. Until then, I'd been too scared to say anything about Julie, worried about how others might perceive me. But when my precious grandson Chris asked for help, it changed everything. I didn't care what others thought of me anymore. Even if David didn't believe me, I was prepared to act alone to help Chris. However, when I told David everything, he believed me completely.
I can't believe this has been going on. All right, we'll do something about it immediately. Why didn't you tell me sooner?
I'm sorry. Julie always acts like the perfect daughter-in-law around you. I thought if I said anything, it might look like I was just being a mean mother-in-law.
That's ridiculous. You're the most important person to me, Betty. I never think you were lying. I believe you without question. Just imagining how hard this must have been for you to keep to yourself breaks my heart.
David's words brought me to tears. I apologized for not speaking up sooner, and together, we started taking action right away.
I want to hear directly from Chris about what's going on.
No, I don't think that's a good idea. The fact that he told me secretly like that bothers me. Do you think Julie might be keeping an eye on him? Maybe Chris saw her with someone or found proof of her affair, and she's forcing him to stay quiet. Could that be possible? David nodded at my suggestion.
That's very possible. Chris doesn't have his own phone yet, and if Julie is watching him, it'd be hard for him to contact us secretly. That means we'll need to investigate on our own.
Seeing my worried expression, David reassured me firmly.
Don't worry. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. Together, we'll make sure to help Chris.
All right. And that's how we arrived at the present situation. David and I came to their house today to confront Julie about her affair. As a result, even if Kevin and Julie end up divorcing, we must take action to protect Chris. I had intended to confront Julie with David by my side, but as I recalled all the cruel things she had said and done to me, my anger got the better of me, and I acted on impulse. However, Julie only looked flustered for a moment before regaining her composure. She sneered at me, placed the tray I had pushed back roughly into the sink, and faced me head-on.
Me? Cheating? You've got to be kidding. You're saying Chris told you that? There's no way. He has always been under my watch. I take him to and from school myself, and he doesn't even have a phone. When and where did he supposedly tell you something like that?
Julie continued speaking with a smug expression, talking endlessly. Then, with a sly smile, she said,
Oh, I get it now. Betty, you just don't like me, so you're making up some ridiculous story to drag me down. Trying to tarnish my reputation, are you? Well, I'm not falling for it. If you tell Kevin I'm having an affair without any proof, you're the one who'll end up looking bad.
But I wasn't intimidated by her threats in the slightest. Oh, you want proof? Fine, I'll give you some. As I spoke, I pulled several items out of my bag. This and this. Oh, and this too. And just so you know, these are all copies. So tearing them up or throwing them away won't do you any good. What I pulled out of my bag was a large collection of evidence proving Julie's affair.
What is this?
At last, Julie's confident expression crumbled. The evidence I presented included photos of Julie meeting her lover and entering and leaving hotels. There were also detailed documents outlining where they met, how they spent their time together, and records of the conversations they had during those meetings. It was an extensive and thoroughly compiled collection of evidence. Did you really think I'd come to you empty-handed? No chance. You've underestimated me for too long. David and I had started by finding a trustworthy private investigator.
A colleague of mine once had a similar situation. His wife cheated on him, and he hired a private detective agency to gather evidence and file for compensation.
Taking that advice, David and I decided to look for a private investigator. We compared several agencies and chose one with a strong reputation. It cost us a fair amount, but thanks to that, we were able to obtain an overwhelming amount of irrefutable evidence.
What's going on with you two?
Kevin came to check on us since we hadn't come out of the kitchen for a while.
No. Don't come in.
Julie panicked and tried to hide the evidence of her affair, but in her frantic movement, one of the photos flew to Kevin's feet. When Kevin picked it up, his eyes widened in shock.
Julie, you?
That's not it. That photo is fake. Actually, Betty has always hated me. She said horrible things to me and even harassed me. But I never told you because I didn't want to upset you.
Julie quickly spun a believable lie. Kevin looked at me with an uncertain expression, but I slowly shook my head. Julie is lying.
No, I'm not. Kevin, you believe me, don't you?
Julie turned her tearful eyes toward Kevin. Kevin looked confused, but David appeared behind him and spoke calmly.
Kevin, I'm sorry to say this, but Betty is telling the truth. Julie has been cheating. And as for the nasty remarks, Betty is the one who has been on the receiving end.
What are you talking about, David? Do you have any proof to back that up?
Julie's voice grew shrill. At that moment, I reached into my bag and pulled out something else. What I took out was my smartphone. I opened an app and held the phone toward Kevin and Julie.
Julie, your mother-in-law sounds like the absolute worst.
Yeah. From the stories, she sounds like she's totally clueless, but an old lady acting clueless is just so cringe.
Exactly.
The phone played the audio of Julie and her mom friends mocking me, which I had recorded the other day. At that moment, even though I was in shock, I instinctively opened the recording app on my smartphone, and I recorded the conversation between Julie and her friends. I had thought about showing the recording to David and Kevin before things escalated to this point, but the content was so outrageous that I worried they might not believe me. I never imagined it would prove useful in a situation like this. Hearing the barrage of vulgar insults, Kevin's face twisted as he looked at Julie, while David's expression was filled with anger. "You threw away the vegetables I brought, didn't you? Well, that doesn't bother me. I guess they didn't suit your taste." Kevin looked at Julie with a face that seemed to say he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Julie turned pale and began trembling at the undeniable evidence that had suddenly surfaced. However, her expression gradually twisted with anger.
How dare you set me up like this?
She screamed and then turned to me, shouting,
Yeah, that's right. I've always hated you. You're so annoying. Acting all perfect as if you excel at both housework and your job.
"What are you talking about? I've never tried to."
You were showing off. As a fellow mother and working wife, it felt like you were constantly rubbing it in that you're better than me. And then acting all sweet and innocent, showing off how much your son and husband adore you, like your life is perfect. It's infuriating. I've always wished you would just disappear.
Until now, I never understood why Julie disliked me so much. Even after hearing her reasons directly from her, I still couldn't comprehend it and was left utterly baffled. Everything Julie said was based on her own misconceptions. Even if it appeared that way to her, I had never intentionally tried to flaunt my life. What she couldn't see was that my family and I had faced our own struggles, things that weren't visible from the outside. Yet Julie seemed to believe that I was living a life full of happiness and showing it off to make her feel inferior.
Julie, how could you say such things to Mom?
Kevin's angry voice rang out as he turned to Julie. At some point, Chris had entered the kitchen as well and was glaring at Julie.
Dad, Mom was planning to run off with her lover and take your money.
Is that true, Julie?
Kevin pressed her further. Regarding that, the private investigator we hired had uncovered solid evidence. Through recorded conversations with her lover, it became clear that Julie had been plotting such a despicable plan.
I overheard Mom talking to her lover on the phone by accident. After that, she kept a close watch on me. She even threatened me, saying I'd regret it if I told you, Dad.
Kevin pulled Chris into a tight hug as tears welled up in Chris's eyes. Seeing the pain Julie had caused my precious grandson, I glared at her with unwavering anger. Instead of showing any remorse, Julie laughed cruelly with a twisted smile and said to Kevin,
Yeah, that's right. I told Chris to keep his mouth shut. So what? Got a problem with that?
What did you just say?
Oh, are you mad now? Don't want to stay married to me anymore? Fine, let's get a divorce. At this point, it's inevitable anyway. But I don't care. My lover will cover the alimony.
Julie laughed triumphantly, her face distorted with arrogance, and continued.
If my affair hadn't been exposed, I was planning to secretly take your money and divorce you with some convenient excuse. Not that I needed your money. My lover has a decent position at his company, so I'm not exactly strapped for cash. Taking your money was just a bonus. After all, putting up with your insufferable mother all this time deserves some compensation.
Let me make it clear. I have never once said anything unpleasant or done anything to hurt Julie. On the contrary, I have always treated her with gratitude for marrying Kevin and becoming a part of our family. But to Julie, even that seemed like the worst offense.
Oh, and as for custody, I'll let you have it. My lover doesn't want to deal with a kid, and honestly, neither do I. I always plan to give you custody after the divorce. A kid who sneaks around exposing my affair isn't cute, and I don't want to be around him anymore.
Enough.
The one who interrupted Julie was David, his face flushed with anger. Stepping in front of Kevin and Chris, David glared at Julie with piercing eyes.
Oh my, are you angry, David? Just so you know, if you lay a hand on me, I won't hesitate to sue.
You're not worth me lifting a finger against. But I'll make sure to deal with you in other ways.
What?
David narrowed his eyes and spoke in an icy tone.
Your lover works for one of our subcontractors. I've reported everything to his boss.
Excuse me?
The subcontractor's CEO went through something similar. His wife cheated on him. At the time, he hired a private detective agency, gathered evidence, and successfully sued for a large settlement during the divorce. Since then, he's despised cheaters with every fiber of his being. When I told him about this, I've never seen him so furious.
It turns out the colleague David mentioned earlier was the CEO of one of his subcontractors. As the liaison with the subcontractor and someone close in age to the CEO, David had a strong relationship with him. Through the investigation, we discovered that Julie's lover worked for this subcontractor. Once all the evidence was gathered, David reported every detail to the CEO without holding anything back.
Since I reported it yesterday, Friday, his desk will probably be cleared out by Monday.
At first, Julie seemed unable to comprehend the meaning of David's words, staring blankly. But as realization dawned, her face grew pale, and she began trembling.
No, that can't be true.
The CEO mentioned he would demote and dock his pay. He's also introducing us to an excellent lawyer specializing in divorce cases. Given his situation, do you think your lover can afford the alimony we're demanding?
David's words seemed to be the final blow, and Julie let out a silent scream before collapsing to the floor. That's the price for hurting my family.
No, it's all a misunderstanding. I never cheated. It was. Yes, he forced himself on me. I had no choice but to comply because he threatened me.
Enough. My sharp rebuke startled Julie, making her shoulders jolt. Stop making these pathetic excuses. What you need to do now is divorce Kevin, give him full custody, and pay the alimony being demanded.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
No, I won't forgive you. Neither Kevin nor any of us will ever forgive you. I looked at my family, and everyone nodded firmly in agreement. Seeing this, Julie's face twisted with despair, and tears streamed down her face. Kevin immediately began the divorce process. The lawyer introduced by David's subcontractor CEO turned out to be highly skilled and managed to fulfill almost all of Kevin's demands. Kevin demanded substantial alimony from Julie and her lover. Julie begged her parents to pay the alimony, and while they did provide the money, they disowned her afterward. They reportedly declared outright that a daughter who would do something so terrible was no longer their child. Kevin also obtained full custody of Chris. As for Julie, her lover abandoned her. With his position at work jeopardized and saddled with the hefty alimony payments, her lover blamed Julie for everything and broke up with her. Abandoned by her lover, divorced by Kevin, and ultimately disowned by her parents, Julie, fearing being left completely alone, reportedly clung to Chris in tears, begging him not to leave her.
Chris, wouldn't you rather stay with Mom? Let's live together.
But Chris rejected her outright.
I never want to live with you. I'm staying with Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa. You can go live wherever you want, by yourself.
Julie deeply regretted her actions, but it was too late. Having lost everyone around her, she fell into financial ruin and reportedly turned to shady jobs to scrape by. It was all her own doing, leaving no room for sympathy. After divorcing Julie, Kevin decided to move out of the apartment where they had been living.
Staying there would just remind me of Julie. It's not good for Chris either.
That's a good idea. Hey, why don't you and Chris move in with us? That way, Chris won't feel lonely.
When we told Chris about the idea, his eyes lit up and he exclaimed,
Really? I've always wanted to live with Grandma and Grandpa.
Hearing that, both David and I couldn't help but smile. Now we're living happily together as a family. Our once quiet home is now filled with laughter every day, and life is truly enjoyable. We've been through a lot, but knowing such happiness awaited us makes all the struggles worth it. From now on, we'll continue to cherish every day together as a family.